Cool. Okay, we're live. Over to you, buddy.
Cool. Well, good morning, everyone. And in this episode of Cool Story Bro, um, we're going to have a little chat about consciousness and what it means to everyone. The format may well be slightly different, but I'm just going to talk about consciousness a little bit and it's why it's important to be conscious about consciousness. I'm not. I'm constantly in this state of being pulled from one reality to another, from society's reality to what I want a reality to be, and I'm never really sure where I'm supposed to be. And throughout our conversations in this group, what I've really been thinking, and what I've probably mentioned quite a few times, unintentionally, is I've always been banging on, and you guys are probably bored of it, about maximizing consciousness. I'm always like, right, why does that make you maximize consciousness? Like, big shout out to everyone. I'm sure you'll give me some cheers. I'm on my 5th day of cold showers.
Hey, there you go. Good man.
And what I've realized is it's another place where I'm so fucking conscious and together. And I've even tried to, stupidly chat to a few people about it. No one cares. And that's cool. Chatted to my girlfriend about it. She cares slightly more than everyone else. But, the question you get is why? And then as soon as you start to answer that question to people that aren't conscious about consciousness, about how you're trying to maximize consciousness, like, they lose interest. They're like, oh, cool. I thought you just like coldness or something. I'm like, no, it's the feeling of being totally connected and unable to concentrate on anything else that I love. So then it led me it led me to thinking about, when else are you maximizing your consciousness? And one phrase I always use with my girlfriend, and that we struggle with, is like, I'm always like, I'm not quite connected to what I'm doing right now. I haven't really found my day to day. And like, then we have this conversation about what it means. And I'm like, what is the opposite end of being just plugged into the matrix, which we all have been guilty of at some point or another, and we're all trying to kind of figure out how to make sure we have the right balance. And she's always like, well, actually, I came up with the phrase first of all, but she's like, well, between us, one of us would say, you can't go skydiving every day. And I'm like, right, yeah, you can't. Why can't you? Like, society says you definitely can't go skydiving every day. So therefore, I'm drawn back into this. Am I supposed to be aiming for skydiving every day? And then I'm like, what is skydiving? What is skydiving to me? In theory, it's like, the feeling of flying. I'm like, I want to fly. I want my life to be me flying. And what I'm really saying by that is, I want my life to be maximized in terms of consciousness. And the moment that I'm not feeling conscious, because I'm aware, because I have some self-awareness, compared to, I don't know, maybe society has it and they just ignore it. But I feel like, these kind of conversations, talking to you guys, being open-minded and trying to find some answers in life, I have some consciousness, relatively, compared to some. So I'm like, right, why can't I skydive every day? And what does skydiving mean to me? And skydiving means to me maximizing my consciousness. And I realized in the cold shower this morning, and I was trying to relate it to skydiving, where you skydive, and for me also, in the cold shower, you never appreciate, like, a skydive's over quickly. like your maximum time of, you think that's where you're having maximum consciousness. But actually, the real consciousness comes when you land. And it's the same with having a cold shower for me. I am so, I'm almost so conscious that I can't think about anything else in that cold shower. But actually, where I get the appreciation from, or the consciousness from the cold shower of what it means is afterwards, right? Is afterwards. So really, I just want to open up the floor to the question. I want to ask all of you individually, what does consciousness mean to you? And when do you feel like you have maximum consciousness?
It's a good question. Who wants to go first?
It is a big question,
well,
and it's a worthwhile question.
I have one sort of comment that I want to make, which is that I think there's a difference between hitting sort of peak states of consciousness and being able to properly integrate those states of consciousness into your waking experience, and then sort of having a higher level of consciousness stably for longer amounts of time. So higher states of consciousness when they go and take LSD or MDMA or whatever, and they go partying or they go into nature or whatever it is. And so they hit far beyond their usual consensus trance-induced state of consciousness. But then lots of them don't have the capacity to come back down to earth in a sense, and then square that with their normal reality. And then either they have like some psychotic break, or they sort of yearn to get back to that high because it gave them so much dopamine. And then like there are challenges in integrating all those experiences. And so the task, I think, is less about trying to maximize how high somebody can get, but to raise the stable level of consciousness that somebody is at. And so the like drugs and other kinds of experiences that increase your peak experiences can be great. You need to find a way to integrate them. So for me, I've actually been offered many drugs, and sometimes the most powerful ones in existence. And multiple times, or most of the time, I've said no, because I felt like I was not in the right state of mind or in the right situation in my life to properly integrate what I would probably gather from those experiences, even if the experiences themselves were pretty interesting. So I think that's very important to sort of start off with.
So Rupert, I'm guessing you're not talking about drug-induced states of consciousness necessarily, but that's
just the way that most people like hear about it.
I mean, it's similar in a way of like skydiving is something that's so intense. It's definitely, it's like thrill seeking. And so there's different ways of kind of, turbocharging your brain and your senses to really perceive beyond what you normally perceive. But yeah, the word consciousness is obviously different for everyone what it means. I think to be sort of fully awake and sensing and experiencing and sort of feel that fullness of life every day, that's probably what you mean by why can't I go skydiving every day, right?
Exactly.
Right. And so, I think that the reason the mass society doesn't think that's possible is because we've all been conditioned to be sort of responsible and think we have duties and, partings for the weekends kind of thing. That's just like the way people live for the weekends, it's kind of ridiculous. And obviously, once you burst out of that bubble, you realize you can do any day what you want to do. And as long as, you're not hurting anyone, it's totally up to your body and your mind how to best go about explore this world and like experience consciousness, right? So, I mean, I've used substances like recreationally, and now maybe more spiritually, or being able to integrate it better to kind of help my regular day-to-day experience. So I think there is use in those substances, and they're kind of grouped together in with other substances maybe that don't give you that, right? Like alcohol I find are very pointless for me now, because it doesn't come close to giving me those sort of experiences or consciousness that other substances do, and it maybe even takes away from that and dulls it a bit. So I think a lot of people are using alcohol and these other substances to try and find that ways of reaching that state in the time they have to sort of indulge, when they're not working or they're not.
Do you think they're doing that, or do you think they're trying to dull consciousness because the consciousness that they have doesn't actually give them anything? Because alcohol's a depressant. It's not a stimulant.
Yeah, I mean, the technical definition of alcohol is interesting, and what it's doing on different levels, I think, is interesting. It obviously opens up people so they're not so inhibited, and that means they can maybe feel like they're being more themselves in a way that society is normally requiring them to act a certain way. And then when you drink, you can go chat to a girl without inhibition. You can maybe go dance without inhibition. Whatever things you feel like you can't do, maybe you feel like you're expressing yourself a bit more easily. So not to the point of getting completely wasted, but just the effect of alcohol can be that kind of loosening up, which is useful for some people to interact socially if they're awkward or whatever. I think there is a valid use in that's how we kind of get used to it. But then there's also becomes a crutch as well, where you rely on the substance to feel a certain way, or you can't express yourself without it. But just coming back to like,
let's use that example. Sorry, mate. Sorry to cut in. Let's use that example with maximum consciousness. I literally give no shits about talking to anyone, whether it's the Pope or the bus driver. Like without not to do with alcohol, but when I'm totally conscious and together. And so do you not then think that they're using alcohol to reduce their levels of consciousness? Because if they were conscious, if they were as present, they wouldn't be able to execute that.
I don't want to judge why everyone's using alcohol. I can only say for myself how I used it and sort of why I'm not using it now. And I think that I didn't have any other substances to explore consciousness or open up different ways of thinking and feeling. And so that was like the default one that's available in every pub. It's like just on tap. So you just go get it when you need to get it. And I think regular society, when you say you can't skydive every weekend, that sort of mentality is why people end up using alcohol and things on the weekends and evenings, because it's the only way or time they have to sort of open up or loosen up a little bit. And it's more excusable, if they act a bit funny or differently, it's okay, he's drunk or something, it's okay, he's drinking. So society is acceptable from that point of view. But I find, it does diminish consciousness in other aspects, because it just affects the brain in certain ways that, closes you off to other experiences. And it can become like
what's the terminology for alcoholism? For someone that you see lying on the side of the street, you say they're unconscious, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, but you could say people are unconscious even though they're walking around the streets like zombies, right? Like in the city, you see a lot of unconscious people walking around.
Who's more unconscious? They're probably of a similar level.
Yeah,
One of them's just asleep.
I don't want to make judgments on who's sleeping and I'm awake or conscious or something, but I think it is interesting to like feel like, look back on your average week or month or year, like the last week for you guys, the last month for you guys. If you can recall the number of different memories or experiences or sensations, that kind of gives you an idea of consciousness on a level of like novelty and how much new things you've tried, and therefore how much richness is in your life. Most people go through a week or a month or a year, and I did this, working years in a corporate job, just stuck in routine. And you look back on the last 4 or 5 years and it just flew by with very little sort of memories left, because your brain is just on autopilot. So I think this sort of subconscious autopilot programming that we're kind of conditioned to live in and think of as normal, and then we use alcohol to kind of break out of that and experience different level of consciousness for a while, that I think is quite damaging for that to be the default state, because we're so much deeper as beings, the levels we can experience if we give ourselves the ability and obviously the faith and belief to maybe choose a different lifestyle that gives us that. So the last sort of week or month or year for me, like 1 year feels like 10 years for me. It's that kind of life where there's just so much going on, and I'm so happy and I feel so in control of where I want to go and what I want to do. So I feel like I can choose experiences that give me a lot of richness and consciousness, if you want to call it, like feeling awake, feeling in the depth of your senses and stretching your senses to some degree, whether it be with certain substances or just, cold showers and things like that.
Oh yeah.
Lynn, tell us about your time of maximum consciousness.
Well, interesting. Like, going from what you guys are saying, I think initially, I'm trying to think. I'm not sure if maybe by the end of this conversation, I'll have a better way to phrase it with words. But going from what you guys have been talking about, I was trying to think about why, I guess, the assumptions of society is very unconscious, and why people say things like, "Oh, doesn't time fly? Oh, it's April already," stuff like that. Because they say when you're doing the same thing over and over again, you autopilot. It's a click world. You just keep with a tape place. You play, rewind, play, and just keep going, keep repeating. So there's no need to go to auto drive. I'm trying to think about how, if we're assuming that humans at one point were not like this, what is it that's made us become like this? It could be, you see things saying, in the past 2,000 years, there's been an accumulation or total of 236 years worth of peace in that time. So it could be purely a survival mechanism. In order for something, from the leaders of these states that force their citizens into war, in order to survive, you need to become a cog. You need to become a bit or quite unconscious, so that in order for things to go and move in automation with each other to as a survival mechanism to move as a tribe, you'll sync up one idea and methodology, a way of approaching and doing things. That could possibly be why we've then come to this state. And interestingly, well, I think it could be interesting. That's why there's still a part of us that's innate, whether it's in DNA or something in the undercurrent or something else, where we're still striving to obtain consciousness. And so the method of doing so may be incorrect, i.e. going for alcohol, which seems to be the most popular, but that could be people's failed attempts at trying to find consciousness. Because I mean, I know, like I had it the other day. I was in Prague. I had a thing. I was sitting, just sitting by the water, and it's everything. I felt everything. And that day felt like one of the longest days I've had in a long, long time. And so this is something I've mentioned in the past, where I know I called it inner peace. So it's probably the same sort of thing, and that's when everything feels, not that it's going slow, but I'm very aware, I'm hyper aware of or maybe not every single moment, but of a lot more of it, to the point where it feels like a long day. I've been fully engaged. I can remember lots of the day, the detail and so on. And I think alcohol may be a failed attempt to possibly, for people trying to attain it. Because, they'll do things that they say, oh, I feel free, release inhibitions, but it's not sustainable. And it's like a little sort of spike. It's just going off from what you guys are saying there, but I see Moritz, feel free to jump in, mate.
Yeah, so I think if the social order that you're existing in has a sort of broad set of roles that you can fill out, that are easy to acquire and that make you functional in the sort of system that you're in, then probably you don't need to pull in a lot of the structure into yourself to be able to operate well. And so those people like us who have sort of fallen by the wayside, or found it too hard to exist in that, or who sort of got the lower end of that stick, or like for some reason were sort of ejected out of that normal way of functioning, we had an extra strong incentive to figure out how to pull all that structure that arranges everything in our environment from a social process out there and a like technological mechanism out there into ourselves, and ourselves being the determining factor in how things are operating around us. And so the sort of higher level of consciousness on a stable level, I think, has a lot to do with how able you are to reverse engineer what's going on out there in the world and to pull that capacity into yourself. And so for me, for example, the best way I found to explain that is, if you think about back to school, in school, your daily life is like, your schedule is determined by the school. The things you are supposed to pay attention to are determined by the teacher. The way you are allowed to move through space and time is determined by like the norms and habits of the institution. Like you have to sit down. The things you are learning and what you need to be learning are determined by someone else. So all of these ways, all these things that are determining how you're spending your time, where you're putting your attention, how you organize yourself, how you manage your own tasks and projects, are not actually a capacity that you yourself are practicing, but something that somebody else is arranging for you, making you conform to. And so me, a lot of the struggle I had after leaving school was to go through the very janky period of pulling all that capacity into myself, so that now I am the one who's creating my own schedule. I am the one who's managing my own projects. I am the one who's determining where I put my attention and my time. And so because of that, I now have a fluency of operating in the social sphere that lots of people who sort of did this gradual upwards path from school to college to like postgraduate maybe, and then to job and like upwards, never had to actually do, because in every single instance that they switched from one context to another, the same assumptions about somebody else organizing their schedule, organizing their day, on sort of all that stuff still remains true.
It's interesting because have you heard about Elon Musk's new school, which has
Yes.
no curriculum, no agenda,
Yes.
no preconceived ideas, just the ability to learn in whichever direction you so fit, you so choose. And I mean, that will literally give everyone to be the opportunity to be whoever they want to be. And why wouldn't you want to give everyone that, especially from a young age, before preconceived societal norms hit your brain and start, you know, forming you, because that's what you're talking about, Moritz, isn't it? You know, being formed into what's perceived as normal, and then figuring out that actually that's not your form.
Right, and I think the norms and sort of the typical stories. There was actually a really good comedy movie in the US, I think like in the 80s or 70s. I think it was called Animal House or something like that, which was created by somebody who basically wanted to show how school life forms people so much that they form their strongest identities around the roles they pick up in that environment, and then they carry that forth into their entire future, their entire life. For example, like the jock, the nerd, the cute girl, the leader, the goth, whatever, and then that determines how they think of themselves in the social order, and they just move forward. And so there is sort of, in the culture, there can only exist a limited set of roles, or sort of that everybody knows about, that they exist and knows how to interface with. So the jock knows, okay, if I see a nerd, then I'm the alpha, and I can like push him to the side, or whatever it may be. You know, like the relationship between these roles is pretty predetermined. But if you give people the fundamental capacity and the tool set to create their own story, create their own identity, and to fluently take on and discard identities that fit them among, like, according to certain parts of their life, then people have a much better ability to be part of the social order, still play the roles and take on the masks that they need to in order to function, but know that the actual identity is much deeper than that. And so I think that's a sort of different way of relating to identity and to consciousness than, oh, I'm getting drunk and I'm like, that's now the way that I can flee the oppressive identity, the oppressive role that I am forced to take on because I have no other choice.
Yeah, that is interesting about alcohol and identity formation.
It's interesting how Elon Musk schools come in, and a lot of these things, I mean, maybe it's just because we have more awareness of what is happening to some extent around the world on the surface level because of, you know, the internet and so on. So this could have been happening decades ago, but I wonder if it is purely because the countries this is happening have not experienced sustained war on their doorstep. Like, obviously, the US has been in a state of war since its, you know, this modern creation in the 1800s, but in the last probably generation and a bit, nothing's on the doorstep. Same here in the UK, nothing on my doorstep. And it's quite a bit more of Europe now. There's nothing on your doorstep for at least a generation of, you know, actual continual. So I'm wondering if that's now allowed the human brain to kind of, no, naturally, you know, things want to, let's say things in nature want to go back to how they're meant to be after. So maybe that could be, it's an attempt by our, whatever it's causing it, DNA, this natural brain chemistry. Once it knows that reptilian part of our brain, to make it a bit scientific, you know, once it knows that, you know, constant fear, danger and fear and so on is not the case anymore, and doesn't have to be in that heightened state of fear or awareness anymore, but then the outer parts of our brain are able to go, okay, let's go back to doing what we're good at. So that could, I'm wondering if that's possibly part of the reason why that stuff like even Elon Musk school could be accepted. There's still people that will shun it, but that would probably be a generational, particularly demographic, that will be like, oh no, that's ridiculous, because they were around in a time of like either sustained war or risk of war on their doorstep. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm planning to.
Emil, I'll go.
Go ahead,
go on.
Rupert.
Go on, mate. I've got a question in a sec, so go for it, pal.
Okay. Yeah, I'm already planning how I'm going to educate my children. I'm probably going to not put them in the school, but like travel around pretty much for the first several years of their life, and have my wife with me as well. And then them just being in different cultural contexts and gaining sort of basic social fluency that comes with a change in your environment happening constantly. So yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah, being okay with a changing environment is really important to me, and that's what I do struggle with a lot in general with some of my relationships, is they're not okay with uncertainty or change, and that's all I enjoy now. Emil, I've got a question for you. When do you feel most alive?
Question. I think it comes down to being very present, as you said. Like when you open up all the senses and take in, it's kind of like opening and closing. So you can close down consciousness a lot and be very much in the mind and have all these thoughts and everything going on. And it feels basically like you're not alive. You're just living in the future or in the past or somewhere else where there's a lot of problems, and you're spending all your energy in that realm. But if you manage to pull all that energy back and be very present in the moment, it's kind of like it's going from close to open up, and you're just taking in on all your senses. And I can't remember who said we have 360 senses, but when you really manage to open that up and take in so much information, which is not either written or spoken or anything, it's just coming out of everything you are in touch with, then you are able to be 100% present and just be with whatever what is. And that's when I feel the most alive, to do whatever the moment brings and enjoy that fully. So today it was swimming and a mud bath and a lot of yoga and sun gazing, and it's just like when you are able to be there 100% and take it in completely, then that's when I feel the most alive, and that's when I feel like almost merging with all the elements and merging with all the energies and the field and the frequencies and everything there is. And I think that's kind of like what people say when they say, oh, we all one, or we're merging back into the one, or all these things. I think it's definitely possible. I think we are way more than this body, and we're way more than this mind, and we're way more than our job, obviously. And if we're able to tap into the limitlessness of the being, then it's just like going back to the base of everything, going back to the source and merging with that and taking in as much as information as possible. And that's definitely something where you feel like you're just like the consciousness that you are, or the consciousness that you are experiencing, or the consciousness that you are part of, is part of the whole, and it's limited by the body and the mind and the stories and everything. So if we split all that open, it's just like merging back into the unified field of consciousness, which we already are. And
Emil, what with total and unequivocal consciousness, what do you think humans are capable of?
everything.
Tell me.
Whatever you want. And I already feel it a little bit in my own life, how we are able to create these resonance fields around our house, around our beings, where we can attract whatever we want. We can attract harmony. Everything in nature is normally harmony. Everything is vibrating at very special frequencies, and we're able to tap into that and harmonize ourselves, like create harmony. And it's spreading just like sound wave or light waves, and spreading around our house and where we move around and spend our time and energy. And if it doesn't get affected by too much like EMFs or too many visitors who are running on another frequency, we're able to create this bubble, more or less, of paradise or whatever we want to create, like harmony, beautiful sunshine, weather, everything. And that's just in the physical world. Then if we take this to other realms, we can do whatever we want. We can leave the body, go somewhere else, experience other dimensions or realities or whatever we want, like the yogis are talking about, like the deep meditators have been talking about for years. Like this physical reality is just one part of the whole equation. And so, but if we manage to talk just about that, then I would say we can do whatever we want. We can create whatever we want, live however we want. If you want to live by the beach every day and bath in mud and make your own clay pots and do that, you can do that. If you want to play the guitar, you can do that. It's like all the limitations are just in the mind. So yeah, it's like there's no limits to what the consciousness can express in the physical world. And
it's funny you say that, because I've been really thinking about what you said about consciousness, about the pharaohs and how they built the pyramids. And I've been really, it was from a couple of episodes ago, I don't know if you remember.
yeah,
And I've been really trying to wrap my head around it, because it makes some, I don't know how, it makes some really bizarre sense in my head that those things cannot have been created physically.
an on something we can relate to. Like whenever you manifest something in the physical reality, whatever it is, whether it's the new apartment building that you're planning to build, you always create it in your imagination first. Okay, an idea, I want to do this. You pick it up from somewhere, like you create it in the realm of nothingness. You pull it down and then you start doing it. It's exactly similar. It's the same with the pyramids, but in this way they just spend way more energy in that realm and created this, and then they can pull it down into the physical reality without doing anything. We have to do it physically. We still create the idea, pull it down, and then use our body as a tool to do it physically. But if you build on that energy, or if you let the consciousness express itself completely without limitations, when you manage to grow that energy so much, you can basically just create the idea in that reality where all ideas are. And I guess it's the fourth dimension, the astral realms, or whatever you want to call it. Put the idea out there and then just pull it straight back into 3D world, like 3D reality. And I think that's what they were able to do. So people always say, oh, they had to be 1,000 workers or 1 billion workers to do that. But I don't think anyone worked on anything. I think it was created purely in their minds, and then they pulled it down and then made it physical in the physical reality. And so there's basically no limits to what we can create physically if we want to create. And I think that's one of the things that we're here to do, to express ourselves, our creativity. And it's one of the most beautiful gifts that we have. And you can see it in musicians on the street. If you go by and you really listen, like the creativity, they can live just from that. And
yes, mate. We talked about creativity, or I talked about creationism being so key. What was it, a week ago? So that fits with consciousness like perfectly.
And we are creators. We are like these God creators stuck in a body with so many stories to tell us what we can't do. But if we remove all those stories, there's literally no limits to what we can do. And creation is just a really beautiful way to express ourselves. Today I created a beginning of the clay pot. I never worked with clay before or anything, but I was just 100% in the moment working with the clay, and it's just beautiful, just creating something without having it to be anything special, just letting the body express itself into creativity. And whether that's music, singing, or clay, or art, or whatever it is, it's really nice. And that's definitely somewhere that consciousness expresses itself without limitations, because we can create whatever we want.
I have a related sort of thought that, or sort of memory to recall. Like a friend of mine recently told me a story how he noticed that he remembered a dream that he had like a couple months ago or so, in which something like some image appeared to him, and then he woke up from that dream a couple months ago, and started and wrote a sigil down, like basically a symbol combination or combination of symbols, and then he like threw that away or burned it or whatever. I don't know yet. I don't know actually, but a couple months later, now it came into his mind again, and it came into his mind again exactly at the time when he realized, oh, what the dream had told him he was going to do, or what was going to happen, happened. And so there's sort of this connection between imagery that's hitting your retinas or your internal brain that you then make sort of into an artifact that you somehow like externalize, and then you forget about it again. And then it starts to work itself into your mind in your subconscious. And then over time, it starts to have a pull effect on you. And so you start to seek out things that pull you closer to that reality. And so then over time, you actually end up seeing it. And maybe you even forget that you were even doing that. And then you remember it again when it has actually happened. So it's a fascinating way of thinking about it. And I think this is some part of the sort of magic conversation that we haven't had yet, which is sort of actually how magicians and modern day and older magicians have actually worked for centuries and for millennia, like sort of this alchemic understanding. And I've started to investigate this much more, because I'm following some people who are actually practicing this on a daily level, of creating sigils, creating their own symbols. And I start doing this too now, but with this drawing tablet that I have here, and where I like now, at first I started creating my own company logo, and now I've been experimenting with sort of runic type visuals. And so I'm experimenting, and it's sort of, one second, I'll show you another one. So
Sweet.
Wow, that's cool.
yeah, this is basically like just one page out of a 50-page notebook on like my company logo, basically, where I'm designing the logo and just playing around creatively with different forms, different shapes, and like making them change them over time. And it's starting to form this pull on me, like that I'm taking seriously my company as a project, as a part of my life, because I'm experimenting with symbolizing it, with putting a sort of a meaningful image to it. And it's starting to become much more real to me. So there is sort of a weird hydraulic dynamic to it, where if you sacrifice time and energy and attention into something, you will get sort of an equal pull on you to move in that direction more. So yeah.
So we're basically saying that in order to achieve, I guess, greater consciousness, it requires intentional intention. Like intent is sort of, that's purely. Yes. But even because I was trying to think of that, if that's the case, even for like what your friends, like your anecdotal evidence from your friend. I mean, I have that. I'm sure we've all had it, where you've had a dream, seems so mundane. I guess it's more like a deja vu thing than what your friend had, and it happens. Like, why did that happen? I couldn't do anything about it. But sorry, ignore that. But regarding intent, like I think that's possibly one of the best ways, or only ways we currently have of achieving. Like say, Mike and Emil, their intent is to get out into the nature, in the aim of achieving, doing what you're doing. Maritz as well, regarding you're dedicating your non-refundable time to something, and things was come from that. Is it? I'm not saying is it as simple as that, but is it as black and white as that? You guys think?
For me,
I'm sure there's more nuance to it, but go on, Emil.
For me, that's exactly how it works, and it sounds very simple, but if we are able to pull back enough of our energy, which is stored in so many different things, it's stored in our job, it's stored in our relationships, it's stored in Facebook, all these, and in our physical things as well. But if we manage to pull enough energy back into our brains, then they become these supercomputers, and that's when the manifestation can happen much more faster. So before, I needed to do like a vision board and sit down and make, okay, I would like a house in nature, I would like to be close to a lake, all these things to kind of put it into perspective. But now I can literally just pull in the energy into an idea, and I can create it, not instantly, but I feel like the process is speeding up. The more power I'm able to generate in my body and in my mind, the more creation power I have. So if I want to create an amazing, beautiful day at the beach, it's like, okay, today is going to be an amazing, beautiful day at the beach, and it is going to be that. It's like all the elements are then just sucked into, I think Michael called it the toroidal field, and it makes very good sense, because there's toroidal fields around our body as well. It's kind of like this recycling of energy going, just like the apple is created. It has a hole in the middle where the energy is kind of circulating, and the same is with the planet, the same with the universe, the same with our bodies. And I feel like when we are in that energy, it's just like, we can suck in whatever we want, and that's how we create, whether we want to create a logo or a business or whatever. It happens in that field, and that's when we suck in the resources we need to make that. And that's why we are the absolute creators. We are these gods that can create whatever we want, but all our energy is sucked into so much other stuff that we accidentally or we unconsciously create a lot of things that we really don't want, because society is trying to steal our energy to create all these weird things. Like how the world works, it's actually created by ourselves, because we don't know what we're doing. So if we remember what it is we're doing and take back our energy and start creating what we want, then we can create whatever we want.
I think the first step is always via negativa, like cutting away things that you don't need, so that you have available energy to dedicate towards that momentum generation that can then take on its own life. And that's basically, I've mentioned this multiple times over the past couple episodes, but like this constant flow state of 1.5 months now, I'm like, it's still going, it's still accelerating. It's like, I'm not even slowing down. I'm getting more out of life by accelerating and taking on more things, but it's getting just better and better. And so I want to share something with you visually here that I've just been experimenting with today. So this is are you seeing this?
Yeah.
This is one of my Evernote notes, and it's called Operativity Master Note. And basically I wrote down like a context. Okay, I'm going to just read this. in operating my second brain and integrating it with my first and third, it is paramount that I have a systematic way to capture awarenesses, refine them into proposals, implement specific changes, experiment and practice those so that eventually the working ones get integrated into my modus operandi. And so then I have a table
literally,
here.
man, your English is better than mine.
Thanks.
Sorry to interrupt. Carry on, mate.
That's
good.
Cool. And so then I have in this table here different categories. Like on the left is like awareness identified, awareness refined, proposal seasoning, change experimenting, change practicing, and protocol integrated. And basically I just put an awareness into the top here when I think, oh, this is something that I'm noticing is not working right or that I want to maybe do. And then I can move it through the stages, and I know where different things are, different awarenesses or different changes that I'm playing with. And then they can move from something I just was aware of into now it's actually integrated into my being, into my way of doing things. And I know how to like, I have gotten a new capacity basically. And so I took this not from my own genius, but from, I just played around with this because I saw the same kind of principle that we were using exactly this kind of way with the Kanban board in Trello that we are using at the Holo company that I'm a part of. And we do it there on the collective level where like people come up with, oh, this is something I noticed is not working or that we need to change. And then we play around and do it collectively. And then stuff moves from an individual awareness into a shared awareness of the group, into a change that somebody's proposing, into an experimenting change, into a cultural habit now completely integrated into the DNA of the company, basically.
I like it, mate. I really like it.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see how your brain works and how you're able to put all these things into a creation as well, to make it visual. Most of the stuff I work with is all in my mind and it's all intuitively, but you have an ability to pull it in and make it real, so you can share it with physical evidence, and it's just really nice.
Right. And I think that's an important part though as well for yourself. Like I love to have all that capacity in here, and that's where it ends up in sort of at the end of the whole process basically. But I'm dealing with so many different contexts, so many different pieces of information that I cannot possibly keep track of all of that just in my mind. And so that's why I use that second brain idea, so this database of information that I'm always having access to, that I can play with this information and move it through stages and change it and transform it. And then creating artifacts in a sense, both in the digital space as well as in actual. Sometimes I'll write a post-it note actually with a thought, and then maybe I'll burn it, or like you can play around with all kinds of ways of actually creating something or transforming something in the real world as well, which then makes it more real to your internal status and sort of accounting system in a sense. And then it starts to have this pull effect on you. And so, yeah, it's just sort of a reimagination of magic, what magicians have known for centuries and millennia for the digital age.
I guess it's also like, and this is why it's the process of creative writing, you know, anyone who does any journaling, and I'd advocate all of you guys to give it a go. It's the process of getting those thoughts out into your head, into your second brain, and then they can live in your second brain rather than being in your primary brain. Because with the amount of stimuli that, especially the guys that don't live in nature, like the Romford Massive and Stratford Massive over here, the amount of stimuli that we get is like beyond unreasonable, or certainly for me, you know, I step out my door, it's beyond unreasonable. So to enable my second brain to be able to process any of my deeper thoughts, or even just box them off, you know, just put them to one side to develop, is very difficult when your stimuli level is at level 4,000. Whereas in the woods, I think you've probably got more of a chance to consider and be conscious about those things that come into your brain. With a bit more peace.
Effortlessly, actually, when we remove all of that, and I think that's why I get so much pulled into nature, because it's just way more effortless. It's just easy being, easy living, and that's basically.
Oh man, I'm so envious.
How we evolved and how we're born, and we're born of nature into nature, and then we kind of retract from that and go into the city to live artificial lives when we are actually removing ourselves from all source of life. And it's really interesting. I think Michael has this term for it. He calls it free range humans. And I think that's what we can become again if we are able to go back into nature and start learning from the mother of all things in reality, instead of creating fake, I call them fake realities, because it's kind of like you can pull in a little bit of life force into it, or you can do some stuff with it, but the real stuff happens in nature, and it has always happened in nature, and we are nature. So the more of that we can take in, the more. I think I read once that we have 60,000 thoughts in one day, and we make 6,000 choices. But what if you remove all the 60,000 thoughts and remove the 6,000 choices and just be? Then there's just effortless living remains, and it's just so beautiful how everything just how you harmonize yourself to reality without having to think, without having to make choices. Really, it's just effortless. Like, okay, I'm hungry. Okay, it's just like open the fridge and you make something beautiful out of nothing, more or less, because it's just like the reality rearranges around your harmony somehow. So if you just harmonize with all the all the frequencies around you, you can just create beautiful meals out of more or less nothing. Or someone will come knock on your door with free strawberries or whatever. You'll pull that in, and I think it has a lot to do with removing all of the unnecessary thoughts and choices in our lives.
I think there's actually lots of research into how our brain understands our environment, and it has a lot to do with tools become extensions of ourselves. And so for me, I can be so present in every single moment and sort of not worry about anything, because I have all that structure externalized into my environment, be it the digital space or like physical space or relationships or whatever it is. And so I know that there's always, I have it there. If I need it, I can go there, but I don't have to worry about it because it is there. And so that's sort of also one of the benefits that Rupert was talking about, I think, with regards to like your second brain or journaling, of externalizing something that is up here into reality, and then either seeing how dumb that worry is, or seeing that, oh, now what do I do with it? And like, you can do something with it. And then also having energy available to then spend it again on the next thing, or just the present moment. And so I find that like it's not either structure or spontaneity. It's like both and, you know, and you can have one because you have the other, and the other way around.
Completely agree with that. I mean, that's what, I mean, my use, so my memory when it comes to things that, and I had to admit it to my other half, I forget a lot of things because it just doesn't interest me. So there's no, my brain doesn't want to retain it. So if there's social events coming up, I love hanging out with friends. Don't go the wrong way. I love it. Like like obviously there are people that I've curated to be in my life, so I've not got a problem with that at all. But the act of having to remember it seems like a complete waste of energy for me. So that's where I will utilize this. And my calendar is Rand. Now, it doesn't intimidate me, but it's full. It gives me that peace of mind where I don't have to remember any of this stuff. And the most used apps on my phone, I always, every now and again, I would purge remove my social media bits, because I am aware that I do get sucked into it. I'm not comparing myself to the Kardashians or anything like that, but I'll find myself just going through it and just, subconsciously, your brain's just making those conscious comparisons all the time. So my two main use apps are calendar. Yes. Yeah, I can't do that yet. Have you got it all hidden in one folder, haven't you? Yeah, I can see it.
Moritz, I copied you, mate, on the grey. It's a winner. I'd recommend it to everyone.
Oh yeah, the colour. I see. Okay.
Yeah. So,
not shiny. You're not going to go for it. That makes sense.
It's very easy. Like, it's basically like you can set it to your accessibility settings so that you just press the home button 3 times, and then you can choose to make it gray. And so I can just immediately switch to color if I need it, but I always have it in gray.
I think it might take me a bit longer. I've got an Android, so 3 it would be probably a few button presses. But yeah, so calendar and notes are my 2 main used things. Because like I said, I mean, I've never really thought of it as journaling, but I guess it is. If something I really want to remember, I may never look at it again, but I'll just put it in there because it can store it a lot easier, and it helps to me to be physically minimal. Although I guess digitally I'm not at that level yet, but I just love that. I've never seen it phrased as second brain before. I've never seen it, so I like it. Sounds, I've got two brains, but yeah, it's good to know.
That's actually this sensation of insight that we have when we learn something new, and it's like, aha, that what happens there in your brain is you find a concept that is able to include and transcend a whole other set of concepts that now are expressed just in that. And so you gain back energy that before was put into more circuits, more neurons than before. And so this is the task of creating energy in your brain, basically, and in your mind, is to find a better conceptual structure to hold an infinite amount of information in it, so that you have infinite amount of energy available to you, because virtually everything can be expressed through a much smaller set of ideas. And so this is also the power behind fractals. Fractals are the way that you can encode infinity into finite space, because fractals repeat at different scales, but they are the same instruction set like across all of the scales.
I understand that.
This is why all these hallucinations and all these visual things happening on drugs have fractal nature, because they're like, you get all of this energy and you get all of this visual repetition of patterns at different scales.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I remember the first time I came across the word stoicism, I was like, that's me. I thought I was just weird for a bit, but I was like, okay, I could relate a lot to the stoicism. That was only a few years I came across that. Was a friend mentioned it, and then, like, for example, like libertarianism, like I could, like, these little things. Not that I need to be put into a group, but like you said, it's increases efficiency, I guess, on a level where, and so even when I don't do it as much anymore. When I used to meditate heavily, like when I was training, the way I had my brain operate, even from a very young age, was that I had folders in my head, and I'd be arranging the day's thoughts and putting them into the necessary folders. That's kind of what I was doing. That's for years, probably close to a decade I was doing that, from a young age, about probably 10, 11, 12 onwards into my early 20s. I probably should get back to doing that, because it's very, very helpful. This understanding. It's a strange mental exercise. I mean, regarding consciousness, do you guys do any sort of, let's say, well, I guess you kind of do meditation, that's what you do, but I mean, like, Maurice, do you meditate at all?
I would say yes, but not in the way people usually think of meditation. Like, I don't sit still and like sit there for hours or for minutes or whatever. I don't really do that. I think I've gotten to a point now where meditation is something I naturally glide into and glide out of in different activities, like be it just a walk or be it like other things. So I've never really found the sitting still for long amounts of time very useful for me. I mean, I just don't have the patience for it, or I always have a better way to spend my time. And so, but I also have found a sort of basic equanimity in myself that I don't feel I need to add more mindfulness on top to sort of compensate for a lack of mindfulness in my other activities. So, yeah.
No.
I have actually meditated a lot, and sat still and worked with the brain and the consciousness and the sensations and everything. And it's for me, it's been very, very giving. But I agree also with Morris that you don't have to do that to meditate. You can meditate all the time. So I'm meditating right now. I'm 100% present here right now. I don't have any other thoughts than that I need to be here right now with you guys and talking and expressing to the best of my ability, straight from the heart or from the source or wherever it comes from. And that's also meditating. And I've been meditating all morning when I was at the beach playing with clay. And I'm trying to meditate all the time. And
Emil, on a consciousness level, given that you've probably had a past with a good amount of societal integration and interaction, what level of you do? Yeah. I'm glad to hear. I was wondering if you were just alone in the woods.
The Northern Tarzan.
Yeah. Yes.
How do you how does anyone, and this is a really open, difficult question, it's for the whole floor actually, how do you measure consciousness? Because it is just a feeling, and feelings are very difficult to quantify. You can't put a number on it without feeling like you're you know, putting it in a box, and feelings you're not supposed to really put in a box. How do you guys measure consciousness?
I think you always measure for a purpose. So I don't think there's such a thing as an abstract measure, a measure without a goal. So if it's like, what are you trying to do? Like, if you're trying to study consciousness as a phenomenon, then you're probably going to want to have scientific measurements that allow you to understand something in the brain. You're going to do MRIs and all that kind of stuff. But for me, I think measuring my own state of consciousness is just, it's sort of similar to to Antonin Scalia's judgment at a court case, where there was a question about what constitutes porn and what doesn't, and he said, I can't tell you what features porn has, but I know when I see it. And so it's sort of like this, you know, like you know consciousness when you feel it, but you don't have a feature list that you run through in order to like detect it.
Did he watch a lot of porn, that guy?
I think he was made to watch porn in the court proceedings, because you have to actually look at the material that was in the court. So judges have interesting lives, trust me.
The way I measure it is not with any like specific measures, but it's like a sense, like an extra sense that I tap into, and I feel like, wow, now I'm there. I'm like Moritz says, it's a feeling, or it's like, you know, it's there. And when you tap into that, it feels almost like tapping into a very, very magic reality where everything is possible, and it's the whole thing that changes. The body becomes loose and soft, and energy is flowing freely through you. I guess universal energy, so whatever it is. So that's actually part of what is expressing. So I guess it's consciousness flowing through you freely. That's how you can feel it. Like the body is loose. There's no thoughts. There's just presence, and everything is just effortless. So whether you take the car and go shopping, it's a little harder to keep the consciousness high, because the density of population and people's thoughts and all this, you get affected by that. So it's easier to maximize it in nature, and easier to sense when you're there in nature. I definitely feel a big difference from going into town where there's many people with many thoughts and EMFs and Wi-Fi and all these things disturbing the harmony. But when it hits, like when you feel like, wow, now I'm there. Now it's almost like, it's almost a little bit like feeling connected, like being disconnected all the time and then feeling connected.
The irony of the internet, hey?
Yeah.
It couldn't.
It's a form of consciousness, right?
I sometimes like think of information or thoughts as sort of a toxic poison I need to externalize as quickly as possible, so as not to like taint my lived reality. It's not really that I think of it that way, but it's a useful frame to hold, at least to have access to, because then like this is something that Ido Portal also talks about, the guy who started the movement culture thing, and he sometimes says like information is toxic. Because it tends to, if you take it too seriously and that's your whole reality, it makes you disembodied, makes you just consume information. This was definitely true of myself. Like I was an information addict, like literally to the point where I did nothing else than consume information, and I didn't actually practice it. I didn't even implement it into my life. And so lots of people have the capacity to understand information and to intellectually engage with it, but they have never actually got the ability to then implement that and to make it shift the way they do things. And so in that sense, it can be toxic if you expose yourself to so much information and you are caught in this pattern and prison of information of like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, this political ideology is something that I want to like hold, or this thing is what I need to worry about, and I need to consume all the news about it, but actually it doesn't actually change your life in any meaningful way. So it's, in that sense, information can be something that moves you further away from the ability to listen inside yourself, to amplify the signal that is emanating from within you, and to build coherence from that signal that then you can broadcast out and find people that have a similar signal or that are responsive and resonating with that. And because we are constantly in society and in cities and all that stuff, not only is the electrical fields all messed up there, as Emil was talking about, but also we're constantly receiving messages from other people and from corporations and from all these things that have specific assumptions attached. And so the sheer load of informational toxicity is so much higher because the intentionality and the goals of the information that is in the environment is polluted by commercial incentives as well. So they are actually putting the messages out not because they believe that this is what needs to be true about the world or what is good to talk about, but because they have bottom lines to hit. And so they need to put out the message that amplifies those bottom lines. And so this is also why a good friend of mine, Skinner Lane, the founder of Exosphere, actually completely removed himself from social media, first as an experiment and now basically permanently, except for like one of them, so as to have his lived reality not anymore be determined by algorithms that are maximizing for emotional spikes to the positive and the negative, and the time that you spend on these platforms. And so
that's a good sentence. I think
now,
we need to remember.
Who is able, yeah, like I'm sort of a sewer rat that is happy with and able to swim in the gullies and in the sewage system of the city and of this information environment, because I am aware of how difficult it is, and I have the tool set and the capacity to navigate through that, and because I'm willing and able to jump into the trash and into the sewage, I can bring back the few kernels of gold that are hidden there that nobody actually wants to go and look up. And so that's been a huge advantage in my professional career now, because I am aware of what's going on out there and why things are happening the way they are and who wants to have certain messages be accepted. And that informs a lot of show up to other contexts and make other people aware of that too, so that they don't have to jump into the sewer themselves.
That's my favorite analogy of all time. Oh my God, that was amazing. That was amazing. I mean, and even one way you could probably, even if someone's maybe watched this and not fully catching on, I think a great example is like the whole entrepreneurship movement. Whereas back in the day it was, have an idea and just execute. Now you have a title, almost like a job title. You're an entrepreneur, and then the phrase "entrepreneur" comes along. I mean, I know I experienced it in the early days. Got over it, fortunately, quick enough, because I found it doing my head in, thinking, because all this information you're taking on the how-tos, and then your subconscious is telling yourself, well, you've not done it yet, which means you can't do it. You're not good enough to do it, but you want to do it, so you keep looking, and it's that loop, which is horrible. So that's probably one very easy way to see it. But I'm talking about the Cal Newport.
Hustle porn.
Yeah, there we go. It's like it also reminds me of a book that I've not read it yet, but I've kind of heard enough interviews about it. A chap called Cal Newport. He's got a book out called Digital Minimalism, and it's along the lines of he never actually got onto it. So he says, and so he's been kind of had like an omnipotent view of it, from outside in, seeing how it's changed because of what you're saying. It's gone from people using social media for its initial innocent purpose, which was to connect, to expand, communicate, keep in contact with people. When the phone first came out, same sort of thing. And then he saw how it changed in like 2011 onwards, where like these corporations are like, okay, we want to IPO at some point. Let's start making our revenue sheets look good. And so it's that awareness of that, to know that, every time you're liking, you're basically making this company money. You're making their shareholders money to get nice amounts of data. If you're fine with that, I guess you're fine with it. But the negatives of it can be so substantial in your life, and possibly might be a bit
it becomes unconscious, doesn't it? I spent 18 hours yesterday in the Matrix, just bringing this back to consciousness.
Please.
Now, look, I really felt like I had to, right? Because I'm in the middle of a defined project.
Sure.
But if you had to do that every day, which is like when I walk past every office building in London, which is filled with people that they're all great dudes, right? There are some really great people in there. I'm not knocking them. But if they can't see that they're already living in the Matrix and they're just using all their energy to give to other people, then it's literally floors of them.
Like battery, yeah.
Yeah, and if you take it into the entrepreneurial context that you're talking about, Lynn, like they have the WeWork style, but it's still a battery farm of people reorganizing the internet, and will be for the foreseeable. And if you have no consciousness, no conscious thought around that, it's going to lead to a very, very sad ending. Very sad ending.
And I wonder how much it correlates, because I mean, again, this is all, I'm all going from things I've read. I've not done any of the investigations myself, or let's say, the research, but it could be, they said, for example, there's a massive increase in reported anxiety and depression. Now that could just be like with a lot of diseases, just because it's recorded now, people talk about it, or it's actually increasing. And if it is increasing, if you look at the big things that have changed societally, and over the timeline, it seems to be, it correlates to some extent, like it lags about a year or two behind. Not to blame social media, because it's basically just a reflection of it kind of just exposes who you are, really. But
it's a reflection of our level of consciousness in dealing with the technology.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly what it
It's
is.
having the awareness to appreciate exactly what it is.
Exactly. And so it's when you see things like that, it's kind of, I mean, it seems obvious, but then I'm sure it's the catch-22 of it, getting out of it. And like someone mentioned a couple of episodes ago, last episode, it's like you got a show, don't tell. As a species, we seem to react better to things we see than what we're told. Being told what to do, is like, how honest is this? But if you can see it working, so I do believe there'll be a larger shift. Like, there's a trend of people downgrading the style of phones, going from smartphones to the old style phones, stuff like that. These things are rippling and expressing themselves in many different ways, not all in one succinct
And
way.
just upgrading.
Being stalked by the government, mate. It's like zapping your body for it. No, it's fine. I've actually ordered, because I want to get my phone out of my room for an alarm, because it's
I
on there.
started doing that too. Yeah.
Pick it up. So I've ordered a £17 Casio watch, because I got a little discount from Argos, and it was. Is
it the original Casio?
No, not quite. It's like a wannabe version of the Roger Moore's James Bond one, where it has like a little dodgy LCD. Not on my wrist, obviously, but a little LCD bit of the world map in 2D. And
wow, mate.
All it can do is show time zones, and alarms, and some other bits that I'm not interested in. I just want it for the alarm, so it goes off next to me. I'll probably never even wear it.
I'm going to throw this out there. I bet the people that live in the woods, I'm not pointing at you, Emil, they have more consciousness because they don't have a watch. I'm going to guess that you don't have a watch.
This is a very interesting subject, actually. And I'm sorry, going on, Emil.
I can give a really good example of that, actually. Like, it feels like you are in the exact time that you need to be all the time. And that means that you can have an insight that says, oh, now it's time to stop playing with the mud because the show is on soon, without ever knowing what time it is. It's just a feeling like, okay, something feels like I have to be somewhere else right now. And then you walk up, start drying the stuff you need to dry, and go in and take care of all the business, and you sit down and there's 5 minutes left to have to be there. So everything's perfect without the time, but we have to be able to disconnect from, because time is just another matrix. It's just it's just a way to coordinate meetings and all these things. But if we get rid of it, there is an intuition in us that's kind of like a guide that always, it sounds maybe a little silly, but if you really sense it, it's like you're always guided to be right where you need to be at the exact.
Emil, you're on the internet with us now, and for our listeners who think sounds all great, but still there is a not a need, but you're obviously not practicing this 24 hours a day because the internet exists and we're having this great conversation. Are we detracting from your consciousness? And I don't mean that in a jovial way, but like, would you prefer to be fully conscious away from this conversation? Obviously, I know you love us and we're great guys and good people to spend time with, but like, seriously, like, is it the extremity of it? Is it worth it?
I definitely think it's worth it, but it has a lot to do with how I see it as well. If my consciousness, or if the mind starts saying, "Oh, I have a better for," then
Love it.
I'm suffering. But if I accept it and listen and be here fully, then it's absolutely amazing, and I get exactly what I need from it, and I hope you get exactly what you need from it as well. But it's kind of like the mind is the controller of consciousness and experience. So if we want to control something very, very much, like I need to get this out of it and I have only 10 minutes left and I have to sun gaze, then you'll be ruining the flow, because you'll be stopping the natural harmonization of the universe, the consciousness from flowing through your body freely by your thoughts, by saying, I want this out of it. And it's kind of like a greed for an experience. And I lived most of my life like that. And it's not the right way for me to live. And I'm not sure it's the right way for anyone to live. But if we manage to decouple from that and reconnect back into the universal harmony, or whatever you want to call it, then it feels like everything is perfect. You don't need anything. Everything you need is right here, right now, and everything you're supposed to have in the next moment will come to you automatically. I know I can even hear it sounds ridiculous, but that's really how it is.
I know what you mean though. Like it's not that it's like coming out of the ether and like ethereal beings are talking to you. It's more, you have such a powerful pipeline and connection from your conscious mind to your subconscious, that all the stuff that you're not consciously aware of, like that is present in your mind right now, that is though still present in the back of your mind in a sense, is always perfectly upregulated or downregulated as the situation demands. And also you were talking earlier about sort of being in nature, being in the, like on the farm or whatever it is, like being in the place where the natural cycles are very easy to perceive. Like in that kind of setting, you've already organized your entire environment around yourself, that you know exactly where things are in your house. You know exactly what your surroundings are in that, like and you gain the sensitivity to all the things around you because you're constantly exposed to the same thing. And in the city, you're constantly switching environments, you're constantly being distracted. You can't actually keep people out of that environment if you want to. And so you struggle a lot to keep the coherence internally because you're not actually master over your environment as much. And so I think it's again this thing of amplifying the signal internally and the ability to perceive it and to broadcast it out. And I think also another point is that Emil has chosen to be here. Like it's a choice, it's a voluntary choice. And it means that it is not something that is imposing on him, but it is coming out of that internal signal that he himself has already amplified so much. And he thinks that's actually adding to his overall life. And I think there's actually a massive opportunity right now in general in society with regards to sort of this general meaning crisis that everybody's experiencing, this general nihilism that we see everywhere, and like nobody is religious anymore. Everybody doesn't know how to justify their existence. And I think there is a huge opportunity here. And sort of I personally am pretty optimistic. We can, first time, I think, or for the first time in a long time, we can actually sort of shed the norms that so far have kept us operating well in society, and instead understand why those norms were valuable, what is actually the reason why those norms were functional, and to integrate all of the understanding into ourselves, so that these choices that were sort of crystallized into societal norms and into sort of roles in society and all that stuff become alive for us, because we ourselves realize why they were in place and why they were beneficial. Like, for example, why is it beneficial to have a family and children and like extended family and friend network and all that kind of stuff? Why is it beneficial to have some sort of religious or spiritual understanding on a group of people that share in your journey? All of those things are long understandings and values of religious traditions and wisdom traditions for all of human history. But we have sort of managed to cut away the ontological certainty anchor that used to justify that in God. God was the thing that, like, the word that we used to say, okay, this is the origin of all of this. And now we're getting to the point where, like, we can't do that anymore. We can't really refer to God or in the sort of naive understanding of God anymore to justify all of that. And now we have the opportunity to become ourselves as gods, or to become ourselves as sort of fully conscious beings, if you will, that understand all of the reasons why things work, and then to have them be tied into our own choices rather than external requirements and sort of conformity that we are forced to conform to.
Dudes, I'm a bit conscious of our time, so I'm going to finish by asking you all one question.
Nice.
What are you going to do today that improves your level of consciousness, Lynn?
Cold shower. That does it for me. Had one already, but I always try and have like. So I'll start my first shower of the day. I'm still a bit scared, so I'll have it warm, and I'll make it very cold for a few minutes, and then later on in the day I'll have a straight cold one just to rinse, and it's like for 5 minutes just so you think, like I said, you don't have the ability to think about anything else because you're so in it. The reptilian part of your brain's kicking in, boom. You've got the dive reflex. It's all in. It's all happening, and so that's what I'll be doing today.
Moritz?
I'm probably going to take a walk and maybe have sex. I don't know yet.
Lovely. With yourself or with someone else?
Somebody else. But
starfish to get some.
I wanted to just briefly say one more thing before you move on to Emil, which is if you guys are interested in like figuring out or finding other types of social media that don't have those sort of toxic mechanisms, I'm going to put a link into the chat to secure Scuttlebutt, which is a sort of gossip protocol that people are using for social media, and where it's much more healthy. It's much more interesting to play with it.
Emil?
What about, where's Michael? Is he still here?
I think he's asleep, buddy.
He's
I'm
disappeared
still here.
into the ether.
He's letting us vicariously sun gaze through him. It's awesome. I appreciate it.
He's channeling the magic to us.
What are you doing for consciousness today, Mike?
Well, I've been staring at the sun the whole time we've been on this call, so that's definitely one thing that works for me. But yeah, I think these kind of conversations really help to get the brain going. Really enjoyed this one, guys. Probably just gonna sit out here some more in nature, maybe go for a run to the beach later. Just a normal day here, so yeah, it's pretty good.
Emil, where you at?
Sounds awesome. I think I'm gonna do exactly the same. I'm gonna stay outside, try to be present, try to observe all the energies coming in and how they affect the body and the consciousness, and try to get out of my mind more, and do some yoga or do whatever the moment calls for, and that's more or less what I try to do every day by now, and it feels amazing.
Same thing for you, Rupert. That question, but also after they answer that question, I want to know why you're wearing a massive jacket in your house. But go for it.
No probs. Today, in fact, I'll show you my house, which actually isn't my house. This is the guys of you that came to the crypto meet. Michael, you remember it? We sat outside. It's a really nice place to come, actually. It's a really good view, 360 view of London. It's probably worth sharing. Hold on. Let me get my keys.
How good his Wi-Fi is.
I want to see it.
It's sunny outside?
Like,
Rupert, you're breaking up.
Must be using the Wi-Fi or something.
Yeah.
It looks like there's a lot of sun outside.
It's bright.
oh, let me. Do you,
And he's back, hopefully.
The suspense.
Well, this call has definitely left me pumped up and at a higher level of consciousness. So
100%. 100%. That's brilliant.
show goes on.
He's gone.
didn't you? And off.
We lost
today.
Rupert.
There he is.
Oh, have I lost you there?
Yeah, back now. What are you doing today to enhance your consciousness levels?
I think he needs to put on this data.
Oh, mate. Actually, I remember the weird thing. I remember I was penthouse sitting one time. Funny enough, being so high up made it really difficult to get any sort of connection. It was so strange. I assumed it was the other way around, but I don't know.
I probably lost you for that entire tour today. Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just going to go for a massive walk today to maximize my consciousness with my phone turned off. So yeah, just going to do a really nice park walk.
Nice.
All
All
right.
right, dudes.
Great topic, mate.
Have a great day, everyone.
You too.
Awesome,
Thanks
guys.
a lot, guys.
Catch you
Bye-bye.
next week.
Catch you later on.